She's doing a CIA informational video.
Weird.
Like an acting gig, or is this something else?
Perhaps, or,
I know,
you know, but even so, you're
Yeah.
doing an acting gig for the CIA. Who calls you for that?
Literally like a registered actress and starred in a reality TV show, a romance one at that. He met her on a trip to Israel.
There's a video of her making demon eyes, and every time she makes the eyes, the music. It's so ridiculous.
This is where the story takes a wild turn. Because when someone like Joe Rogan starts talking, everything changes overnight. And that's exactly what just happened. Because what started as internet whispers about Erika Kirk suddenly got pushed into the mainstream after Joe casually brought it up on his podcast. But the way he said it... That's what set everything off, because he didn't just question her behavior, he hinted at something deeper, something people online have been whispering about for months using words like handler, training, and even possible intelligence-style connections. And the moment that clip hit the internet, it exploded, because now it wasn't just random accounts making claims. It was the biggest podcaster in the world putting those same ideas into a conversation millions of people were watching in real time. And that instantly gave the whole situation a different level of weight. But here's where it gets even crazier. Because instead of ignoring it, brushing it off, or letting the moment pass, the narrative flipped when Erika reportedly responded. And not quietly either, because according to what's circulating, her reaction wasn't just defensive, it was aggressive, with claims that sounded more like warnings than simple pushback. And that's the part that really made people stop and think, because when someone responds to a massive public figure like Joe Rogan in a way that feels like a threat, the first question everyone starts asking is the same. How much power do they actually have? And more importantly, who's backing them? Because let's be real, people don't just casually talk about someone like Joe losing his platform unless they believe they have some kind of influence behind the scenes. And whether that's true or not is still up for debate. But the perception alone was enough to send the internet into overdrive. And now the situation has completely shifted. Because this isn't just about rumors anymore. It's about a public clash, a narrative battle, and a growing audience trying to figure out who's telling the truth. Because on one side, you've got Joe Rogan openly questioning things, and on the other side, you've got Erika Kirk pushing back in a way that only raises more questions. And right now, nobody's backing down. Which means this story, it's only getting bigger from here. Once Joe Rogan said that one word, handler, everything changed. Because what had been floating around in smaller corners of the internet suddenly got pushed into the spotlight. And the reaction was instant, because that term isn't just random, it carries a very specific implication. And when millions of listeners hear it connected to Erika Kirk, it triggers a completely different level of curiosity, skepticism, and speculation all at once. And that's exactly what happened. Because within hours, clips started circulating everywhere. People started revisiting old interviews, breaking down her behavior frame by frame, analyzing tone, expressions, even the way she speaks and whether you believe any of it or not. One thing is undeniable. The conversation exploded beyond control, because now it wasn't just about what Joe said. It was about what people thought they were seeing all along but didn't have a big voice confirming it. And then came the deeper dive. Because once the internet locks onto a theory, it doesn't stop at the surface. It starts connecting dots, real, exaggerated, or completely speculative. And suddenly everything from past appearances to rumoured background details started getting pulled into the same narrative, with users asking questions like why certain clips felt off, why her delivery seemed different from what they expected, and whether there were patterns they missed before. And that's where the handler idea really took off. Not as a proven fact, but as a theory that people kept feeding with more and more content. And the more content they found, the stronger that perception became. Because in viral culture, repetition creates belief, even when confirmation is missing. At the same time, pushback started building too, because not everyone was buying into it, with some people saying this is exactly how online speculation spirals out of control, turning normal behavior into something mysterious just because it's being viewed through a certain lens. But here's the problem. Once a narrative like this reaches mainstream attention through someone like Joe Rogan, it doesn't go away easily. Because now every new clip, every old video, every public appearance gets reinterpreted through that same idea. And whether it's true, exaggerated, or completely off base, the impact is the same. The story keeps growing, the questions keep multiplying, and the line between fact and theory becomes harder and harder to separate. But what really pushed this story into another level wasn't just the handler theory. It was the reaction that followed. Because according to what's been circulating online, the situation escalated when Erika Kirk allegedly didn't just deny the claims, but responded in a way that people interpreted as a warning toward Joe Rogan. And that's the moment where everything shifted from curiosity to concern. Because questioning someone is one thing, but when the response starts sounding like consequences could follow, that's when people stop and ask a completely different set of questions. And the biggest one being repeated everywhere right now is simple. How could anyone realistically threaten someone at Joe Rogan's level? Because we're talking about one of the most powerful independent voices in media. He's someone who's built his platform outside traditional systems, so the idea that he could be taken down isn't something people hear lightly, and whether those claims are exaggerated, misunderstood, or completely untrue, the perception alone has added fuel to the fire. And this is where the conversation gets even more intense, because once the idea of influence or backing enters the picture, people immediately start speculating about power structures behind the scenes, asking who might be connected, who has leverage, and whether there's something bigger at play that the public isn't fully seeing yet. And again, there's no verified proof supporting those conclusions. But in the world of viral narratives, the possibility is enough to keep the discussion alive, especially when combined with everything that came before it. From the theories to the timeline questions to the sudden mainstream attention. And now it feels less like a single controversy and more like a layered situation where each piece adds to the next, creating a story that keeps pulling people deeper the more they look into it. At the same time, there's another side to this that people are pointing out. How quickly things can spiral when clips are taken out of context, when statements get repeated without confirmation, and when online conversations turn speculation into assumed reality. And that's why this moment is so critical, because depending on what comes next, whether it's clarification, denial, evidence, or silence, the entire narrative could shift again, either calming things down or pushing them even further into the spotlight. But right now, one thing is certain. The combination of a massive voice like Joe Rogan and a controversial response linked to Erika Kirk has created a situation the internet is not letting go of anytime soon, and just when people thought this couldn't get any bigger, another major voice stepped in. And that's when the situation truly went nuclear, because Candace Owens didn't just react quietly, she amplified everything, taking what Joe Rogan brought up and pushing it even further into the spotlight. And that changed the entire dynamic, because now this wasn't just one podcast conversation anymore. It became a multi-platform narrative with multiple high-profile figures discussing the same topic, which instantly made it feel more serious to a wider audience. And Candace didn't hold back either, openly questioning the behavior, background, and public image of Erika Kirk, while also suggesting that the public might not be getting the full picture and whether people agreed with her or not. Her involvement brought in an entirely new wave of attention because her audience is massive, highly engaged, and already tuned in to political and cultural debates, meaning the story now reached millions of additional viewers who may not have even heard about it before. And this is where things really start to spiral, because once multiple influencers begin discussing the same topic, the internet doesn't just watch. It reacts, splits into sides, and turns the situation into a full-blown debate, with some people backing Joe Rogan and Candace Owens, saying they're asking valid questions, while others push back, by arguing that this is exactly how narratives get distorted and individuals get unfairly targeted without concrete proof, and that divide is what keeps the story alive. Because now it's not just about facts, it's about belief, perspective, and which side people trust more. And once that happens, the conversation stops being linear and becomes a constant back and forth, growing louder with every new clip, reaction, and breakdown. At the same time, the involvement of multiple public figures raises another key point. When conversations like this reach a certain level, they're no longer easy to control, because even if someone tries to shut it down, redirect it, or clarify it, the narrative has already spread across too many platforms, too many audiences, and too many perspectives, making it nearly impossible to contain. And that's exactly where this story is now. A moment where the combination of Joe Rogan and Candace Owens discussing Erika Kirk has turned a niche internet theory into a nationwide conversation that continues to grow with every passing hour. Once voices like Joe Rogan and Candace Owens pushed this into the spotlight, the internet did what it always does next. It started digging, and not just lightly, but aggressively, pulling up old clips, past appearances, interviews, and anything connected to Erika Kirk that could either support or debunk what was being said. And this is where things got even more intense, because now people weren't just reacting to one moment. They were building timelines, comparing behavior across different videos, and trying to spot patterns. And one of the biggest things that kept getting discussed was her on-camera presence, the way she speaks, her delivery, her expressions, especially those viral clips that people kept replaying and analysing frame by frame, with some viewers saying it felt unusual or hard to read, while others argued it was simply being over-analysed because of the current narrative surrounding her, and that split in interpretation only made the conversation louder. At the same time, discussions started expanding beyond just clips and into background details, with users bringing up past associations, appearances in certain types of content, and even trying to trace connections that might explain why her name is now at the center of such a viral debate. And while none of these claims have been officially confirmed, they continue to circulate because they fit into the larger story people are trying to piece together. And that's the key point here. The internet isn't just consuming information. It's actively building a narrative in real time, connecting fragments, questioning inconsistencies, and filling in gaps with theories that may or may not reflect reality, but feel compelling enough to keep spreading. And this is exactly why stories like this don't fade quickly, because once people start believing there's more beneath the surface, every new piece of content becomes evidence in their eyes, even if it's just being interpreted through a specific lens. And now we've reached a point where almost anything related to Erika Kirk gets pulled into the conversation, re-examined, and debated, and turning what might have once been overlooked details into central talking points. And whether this deep dive ultimately leads to clarity or just more confusion is still unknown. But one thing is certain. The internet is fully locked into this story, and it's not letting go anytime soon. At this stage, the story isn't just about clips, theories, or even individuals anymore. It's about who controls the narrative, because once a situation reaches this level of attention, it turns into a full-blown media battle. And that's exactly what we're seeing unfold right now around Erika Kirk, especially with major voices like Joe Rogan and Candace Owens continuing to keep the conversation alive. Because when influencers at that level speak, they don't just share opinions, they shape how millions of people interpret the story. And that creates a situation where perception becomes just as powerful as facts, if not more. And that's why every response, every silence, and every statement now carries weight. Because people aren't just listening, they're analysing tone, timing, and intent, trying to figure out what it all means beneath the surface. And here's where things get even more complicated, because when narratives start spreading across multiple platforms at once, they become nearly impossible to contain, especially when different sides are pushing completely different interpretations, with some saying this is a coordinated attempt to expose something hidden, while others argue it's a perfect example of how online speculation can spiral into something much bigger than reality, and both perspectives are gaining traction at the same time, by creating a situation where there's no single dominant version of the story, just multiple competing ones, all fighting for attention, and that's what keeps the momentum going, because as long as there's no clear resolution, people keep watching, keep debating, and keep sharing. At the same time, the involvement of high-profile figures means this isn't something that can easily be ignored or brushed aside, because every time the topic gets mentioned again, whether it's on a podcast, a social media post, or a reaction video, it pulls the story back into the spotlight, giving it new life and extending its reach even further. And that's why this moment feels like a turning point, because depending on what happens next, whether it's direct responses, new information, or continued silence, the entire narrative could shift dramatically, either settling into clarity or exploding into something even bigger than what we're seeing now. But one thing is certain. This isn't just a viral moment anymore. It's a full-scale narrative war. And right now, everyone is watching to see who controls the ending. And now it all comes down to you. Because after everything, what Joe Rogan said, how Erika Kirk responded, and the way Candace Owens amplified it, this isn't just a story anymore. It's a full-blown debate happening in real time. And the biggest question is simple. What do you actually believe? Because right now the internet is split. Some people think this is all being blown out of proportion by viral momentum, while others are convinced there's something deeper that hasn't fully come out yet. And the truth is, until something concrete drops, evidence, confirmation, or a clear response, this story is going to keep growing because unanswered questions don't disappear online. They multiply. So don't just sit back and watch this unfold. Jump into the conversation, drop your opinion in the comments right now because I'm reading everything and I want to know where you stand on this. Hit. Like if you want more real, unfiltered breakdowns like this, subscribe so you don't miss the next update because if anything new drops, you already know we're covering it immediately. And share this video with someone who's been following this situation because the more people paying attention, the harder it is for any story, no matter how big, to stay hidden. Stay locked in. Because this is far from over. Hashtag Joe Rogan, hashtag Erika Kirk, hashtag Candace Owens, hashtag viral debate, hashtag comment now, hashtag stay tuned, hashtag breaking story, at Joe Rogan, at Erika Kirk, at Candace Owens, at YouTube trending, at viral now.